let's get started. Today we have quite a bit to cover. Today's topic is really heavy. It's coordination and response. So we're going to talk about the brain. We're going to talk about your central nervous system and all of the process involved, with nerves and neurons and the interaction that takes place, the whole communication network that basically takes place within your body in order to, in order for you to function on a day-to-day basis, respond to stimuli and, just be able to live in general, right? So, and apart from that as well, we also going to cover the eye. So we're going to learn about the structure, how the eye functions in order for us to be able to see, how the brain is involved in this process. And so it's quite a bit. So I'm going to need you all to just, be patient, give me undivided attention. And well, of course, at the end of it, the session is being recorded, so you all will have the video together with the audio to listen over, and you all could, review it afterwards. And I also prepared a worksheet for you based on the topic, so you all will have that practice. So, like as soon as you're finished with the worksheets, you all can send it to me to look at. And um, when next I have you, next week Sunday, we have another session, just as how we had our session yesterday from 2 to 5. On April 5th, next week Sunday, we'll have our next additional session. So then we could go through the worksheet, and we could continue on with the topic and just tie up any loose ends or any misunderstandings that you all may have had based on the topic, okay? And of course, feel free to interrupt me anytime during the session to let me know whether or not you understand. If in case you send a message and I didn't see it or anything, just unmute your mic and just, hail me and let me know, right? As some of you have done before. Okay, so let's go. I'm gonna share the screen with the PowerPoint now. So I'll leave it like this. I wouldn't put it full screen so that I'll be able to see if anybody sends a message, right? Okay, so again, today we're going to talk about coordination and response. And these are all of the objectives that you all need to know for this topic. All right, so we need to learn to describe nerve impulses. We have to know the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system, and how they both work together in order to regulate bodily functions. We need to know what are effectors, connectors, sensory neurons, and so forth from diagrams. We need to know how to identify them, how to label them, specifically how to label them, what goes on in a simple reflex act. So like for reflex actions, which you all would have heard about, like when it is you go by the doctor and he takes the little hammer and he hits your knee and just to test your whole reflex action. Right, so we're gonna learn about reflex actions and what happens in such actions and why it is your knee will jerk, why is it that your hand will just naturally pull away from a hot plate or a hot pot or something of the sort, right? Um, we need to know about synapses. So we're going to take our time and break down each thing little by little, because especially talking about synapses, it could become a bit confusing for you. So we'll take our time and we'll go through them. All right. Right, and lastly, we're going to talk about the eye. We're going to look at how different parts of the eye function in order for us to be able to see, and how the role of the brain and all of this as well, right? So also we're going to learn a little bit about how light is bent in order for us to be able to see objects, right? So yeah, so that is today's session. It is packed, as I said before. From now until, for the next few classes, the topics are going to be pretty heavy in terms of content and in terms of what you need to understand. So it's just gonna get a little bit steeper, I should say. So I just need you all to bear with it for a little bit, and then once we have finished the hard topics, I will let you all know, so that the others would just be basically theory, and some of it would be common knowledge, right? So it would more be to have discussions and so forth. So it should be a little bit easy on your brain, so to speak. All right. Okay, so let's get started. Right. So first of all, we need to talk about what is coordination. All right. Now what happens is that we live in a world, all of us, all right, living organisms, be it us, unicellular, multicellular organisms, plants, whatever, living organisms. We live in a world and we need to be able to contact this world. We need to be able to be sensible to changes in our environment and be able to adapt to them or react accordingly. All right. Now, any kind of change that happens in the living environment, in our environment, is called a stimuli. Well, it's called stimulus, the singular. Plural would be stimuli. So, what happened is that with whatever changes that occur, it could be changes in temperature, or whatever it might be, we need to be able to respond appropriately to that. All right. Even danger. All right. When it is you see, like for example, a bear or a lion, you you automatically know, hey, okay, my life is on the line. This creature could tear me to shreds, and you react accordingly. All right. So we're going to learn about the different reactions as well that occurs when it is you see, something life threatening even. All right. So we need to be able to respond to these stimuli effectively in order for us to survive and in order for us to live. Okay, we just came through the skin. We learned about how it is we adapt to temperature changes, the various processes that take place in the body to raise or lower body temperature. All right, so now we're getting a little bit more in depth. Now, what happens is that in smaller organisms like unicellular organisms, all right, they don't have such a complex system for receiving information or detecting stimulus per se from the outside and reacting accordingly. All right, they don't have like a complex system as we do. They wouldn't have like a whole big brain, a spinal cord, and all of these things, nerves and whatever. So when it is talking about a unicellular organism, remember it's a very small creature. It's one cell, a single cell organism. So like for example, in the case of the amoeba, um, if it comes into contact with food, what it will do is that it will enclose the food with its pseudopodia or little feet, little false feet. That's the best way we could describe it. It will enclose it and it will trap the food in a vacuole. All right, kind of similar. You'll remember when we were talking about phagocytosis and how your phagocytes engulf the pathogen and it locks it in a vacuole. It's kind of similar to that. So think of it along that line, right? So you will get the image in your mind. So it will surround the food and then it will, well, from there, it would be able to digest it and eat it accordingly. All right. But you see now, it comes to a larger organism now, we need to have more structure. We need to have more organization. We need we need more. So hence the reason we need to have a more complex nervous system. And that's why we have actually two forms of it. We have a central nervous system and a peripheral nervous system. All right, so that we could act as a unit, we could function properly, and we wouldn't do bizarre things. All right. Okay, so when an organism now has a nervous system, it will allow for the transmission of sensations from one part to the other in order for the entire organism to function as one. All right, so it's not that your hand will be doing something different from your foot, or like not like your hand will just rapidly slap your face unless if you're malfunctioning somehow, right? So every single part of your body, if you notice, once everything is working good, right? It will move in order to for you to accomplish whatever task that you have to accomplish. All right, everything will sort of fall into place and your body will react accordingly. And this is all thanks to you having a nervous system. All right. So before we get into the complicated form of our nervous system, let's talk about what is a simpler version of a nervous system. This version is called a nerve net. So as it implies, it's like a net of nerves that come together to form what is called like a net, all right? This type of nervous system can be found in sea anemone, even other members of jellyfish group of animals, all right? So how it functions really, really simple. All you need the sense cells and you need neurons, right? Your sense cells in a nerve net, what they do is they sense the stimuli around them. So whatever changes would be happening in the environment, your sense cells, as the name suggests, will sense this. And then this information from these sense cells will be passed along neurons, which are like wires, you could say. All right, so but they are special conducting cells, but think of them like wires. So they will be passed along these neurons, which are like wires, and they link up to each other in a whole network. And based on the information relayed from the sense cells to these neurons, the muscle cells in whether it be a jellyfish or an anemone would react accordingly, right? So either like let's just say you touch a jellyfish or you touch a sea anemone, it will retract because it is reacting to you touching it. So when you touch it, right, that electrical impulse will be transmitted from the sense cell all the way through the neurons, and then it will cause now the muscles of the sea anemone to contract and pull away because that will be it's sensing danger. All right, and that is just simply how a nerve net functions. Um, we have a more complex system. So with the nerve net now, once you understand, okay, this is how it works in a basic format, we're going to get into the more complex format in a bit. All right, everybody good so far? Y'all okay up until this point? This part don't really come in exams, but if it does come, it may come in like multiple choice or so. All right.
Yeah, miss, I'm good.
All right, wonderful. All right, so we come into some terminologies. All right, now, like this topic, as most of your, or as all your topics in bio, chem, physics, etc., um, you need to be, you need to know and know your terminologies really well because they will use terminologies. They're not gonna use some kind of shortcut and just say like, oh well, what if they don't understand the terms? No, you need to know your terms, right? So you can understand what the question is really asking, and you'll be able to utilize these terminologies even in your answers, which is integral for you getting your marks. All right. So we have receptors, effectors, and neurons. What are receptors? Receptors, as you could probably hear in the name, it sounds like recipient or receive. So therefore, your receptors receive stimuli. All right, they sense the stimuli, they receive the stimuli from the outside. Okay, your effectors, as the name suggests as well, produce a particular effect based on the information they would have received from the stimuli. All right, so what happens is that your effectors now will respond. They will produce a particular effect. So think of it like that. You have to receive it first before you could even, produce some effect. So when it is you touch a hot plate, you have to receive the extreme heat before you could even begin to pull away. So the action of you pulling away is caused by your effector cells. Okay? And neurons, as the term came up just now, those are like your wires, which are conducting cells. So they contain a number of thin fibers which lead out from their cellular bodies, and sensations or messages pass along these cells. Okay, so these are like your wires. And this is an example here. Let me just show you what the neuron looks like. This is what a neuron looks like. And these are your conductor cells. All right, so what will happen is that this here, this whole fuzzy head looking thing on top here is actually called your cell body. Okay, and you're seeing all of these little projections that lead out from the cell. These are what receive the impulses from other neurons. So what happens is that as we just spoke about your receptors also have a similar structure. So what happens is that you would have one of this to receive, and then it will be passed along several of these neurons until you get the effect that you want, and they all look similar to this. All right, as we go further, you'll be able to see how different types of neurons. We're just gonna talk about three, but we're going to look at these different types. So this here is what we refer to as your cell body. So when an impulse or when an electrical impulse comes through these dendrites, as we see in here, this is called the dendrite. When it comes through here, it passes through the cell and it continues along all the way until it reaches the end, where the message will then be transmitted to another neuron just like this. So when the information or the electrical impulse reaches here, then the start of the other neuron will be again a dendrite. Okay, so it starts off from the dendrite, goes straight through, passes through the axon, goes to the end, and then it would be relayed to the dendrite of another neuron again. All right. Typically in mammals and animals, this is how the neurons look. It's not really different. All right. So you have a dendrite which links up to your cell membrane here. All right. And look in the middle, just like a typical cell, you have a nucleus. And notice that you have cytoplasm. So all of this here is filled with cytoplasm. All right, which helps conductivity, because remember the cytoplasm is that more liquidy part of the cell. Okay, so all of this helps to conduct the electrical impulses along the neuron. Okay, as we go down, all right, we advance from the cell body, we advance through the axon. So the the electrical impulse continues along the axon, which is this thin line here. Okay, and along the axon, you'll see in these cells are responsible for making what is called myelin. Okay, myelin sheath. So what happens is that, remember, it's electricity you're dealing with, right? So just as how when it is you're dealing up with wires, high tension wires, you need to have insulation for the wires to allow for the current to be conducted at a fast rate, and so that it wouldn't even damage the wire even. All right. So um, the myelin provides that insulation that is needed in order to allow for the electrical impulse to be smoothly and swiftly passed along the axon. All right. And then to the end here is where you have, we call it the axon terminals or the nerve ending. It's called axon terminal because, as you can see, it leads from the axon, right? And then it branches off to these nerve endings. So it's still part of the axon, but it is at the end of the axon. So that is why we call it the axon terminal. And then it's a terminal because it is the point at which the electrical impulse will then be passed on from here, from the nerve ending, to the dendrite of the other neuron. Did I lose anybody, or y'all with me? We good so far? Okay. Wonderful. All right. So that is the structure of the neuron. Okay. Right, so this is basically what I just explained from the diagram, right? Now the thing about it is that we actually how our neurons are designed, right? messages can only travel in one direction. So if we look at this neuron again, when the impulse enters from the dendrite, it just goes straight. It does not allow for two-way or the opposite direction, for messages to be traveled in the opposite direction, or it doesn't allow for, one message to come through here and then the next message go in the opposite direction. No, everything goes through in one direction. But you see now, when it is you're dealing with the nerve net, which is the nervous, the type of nervous system that you would find in smaller creatures, when you're dealing with a nerve net, messages can be transmitted in both directions, in any direction actually. All right, but you see, that could be chaotic when it is you're dealing with a more complex organism. All right, so once messages can be allowed to pass in only one direction, it makes the system more precise. It will not allow for any mix-ups or anything. It's more order, okay? It's more precision as compared to allowing the messages to move in any direction along the nerve fibers. And it also allows for the information to be transmitted at a faster rate as well. By our neurons having that myelin covering along the axon, which, just to go back so that you'll remember it. So remember, this is the axon and this is the myelin sheath. So by our neurons having this myelin sheath, it enables for electricity to be passed through quickly. All right, so our system is more efficient, more precise, and the myelin sheets allow the messages to be transmitted quickly. All right, so the myelin is really, layer. It's basically fat and protein. All right, which will provide that insulation. So you see, just as how fat provides your body with cushion and it insulates your bones as well, and it keeps you warm. Well, in this case, the fat and protein will insulate the quote unquote wires, which are your neurons. All right. But you see now, if it is we did not have the myelin insulation, imagine impulse would only be traveled at 5 meters per second. But like, for example, in the body of a cat, it can carry impulses up to 100 meters per second because of the myelin that covers the nerve fiber. All right, hence the reason they will be able to react to stimulus and, act quickly. All right, the cats would move so slow, almost like slow motion, if it is you only had the fibers carrying impulses 5 meters per second. So anytime a cat chasing a mouse or something, it would just be moving in slow motion, or it may not even realize it, or it really wouldn't allow for the cat to live its life accordingly. Yes, it could. Yeah. It could be why it says they always land on their feet too. Because of how fast their reflexes are. So that when it is they're falling, they're able to predict that danger and contort their body accordingly so that they can land on their feet and have that quote unquote 9 lives. I don't know if you all saw, but on Facebook they had this black kitty that was on some high building, but it was on the wall looking like Spider-Man. And then the cat just fell off, it just jumped off and it landed on its feet. And if you see the height from which that cat fall, oh my gosh. If I can get it, I'll show it to you all. But that, yes, is a classic example of why they would land on their feet. All right, how their bodies would react to them falling. Okay. Unfortunately, we just big and heavier, so sometimes when we jump, we'll just either fall, break a leg, break a hand, or something, break a hip even. All right. Okay. Right. So so nerves are just basically a group of nerve fibers. All right. So all of your nerve fibers come together to form what is called nerves. And these nerves, they run throughout your entire body, and they all, comprise your nervous system. All right, so now we're going to talk about, now that we learned a little bit about what a neuron is and all of that, we're going to talk a little bit about the nervous system. What are the two types of nervous system that I mentioned before that we have? Anybody remembers? Two type of nervous system. Yes, very good, Cheyenne. Very good, Emily. Yes, central and peripheral nervous systems. Excellent. All right, so we're going to talk about the central and the peripheral nervous systems now and what they both comprise. Right, so this is our complex nervous system now. We have two types. We have central and peripheral. So the central nervous system consists of the brain and the spinal cord, period. Just the brain, just the spinal cord, all right? And the peripheral nervous system consists of nerves and receptors. So when it is you're thinking about peripheral, right? Like for example, in IT, you have a mouse which is externally connected to the laptop. However, because it is externally connected, it can transmit information from the outside towards the inside or the internal functioning of a computer. All right, so that is in essence why the peripheral nervous system is called peripheral nervous system. All right, because remember your nerves and receptors, they help you to interact with the outside world and, you know, react to the change stimuli, and it will relay this information to your central nervous system, and your central nervous system will then tell you how to act. All right, which is why you rely on both. And all of this happens in a split second. You faster than you could even blink your eyes, faster than you could even think, right? Because remember, nobody would experience buffer unless you have some disease or something. You won't experience a buffer. You won't experience any delay in this process. It just happens so quickly. All right. So what happens? Your central nervous system, it is made up of neurons. Its role is to coordinate messages traveling through your nervous system. All right, so it's like the great head. It's the brain and the spinal cord. All right, remember, if you damage your spinal cord, you won't, that's why you get paralyzed, because you'll be able to think, yeah, but you can't carry out any functions, basically. You won't be able to move because from your spinal cord, your neurons, they link up with your arms, they link up with your legs and everything else. So that's why if you have a serious injury to your spinal cord or serious spinal injury, you'll be paralyzed. All right. Now, what happens is that when the receptor cells now, your receptor cells, be it like your receptor cells on your fingertips or your skin or wherever, when it detects a particular stimulus, it sends this information in the form of an electrical impulse to your brain and your spinal cord. All right. And then when your brain now, or when your brain and your spinal cord receive the message now, it will send an impulse along certain nerve fibers to certain effectors so that it's like, okay, it gets the information from the outside, the pot hot, right? What will happen is that it receives this information. All of that information is encoded in the electricity that is passing through, all right? Then when your brain and your spinal cord receives this information, it's like, oh, the pot hot, well, you need to pull back. So immediately now it will send this response, say, okay, pull back hand, through the nerve fibers to your effectors, which in this case would be like the muscles in your hand. Your muscles will contract and your hand will therefore be pulled away. All right, so remember your effectors are those nerves that are responsible for carrying out the effect. All right, so you sense the stimuli, right? Then your brain and your spinal cord will interpret this message and will tell now your effectors how to respond, what effect now to produce after receiving this particular information. Do you all understand so far? Or did I lose anybody?
Yes, miss.
Okay, wonderful. So this is the diagram of what I was just explaining. It's called a reflex arc. So the reflex arc is basically your reflex action, okay? You can have two different types of reflexes. You can have a voluntary reflex action, or you can have an involuntary. So what do you all think is a voluntary reaction? Just hearing the term voluntary. A voluntary reflex action will be like clapping. Yeah, because when it is you have to clap, what will happen? Right, very good. You think about doing it. So that is voluntary. So you think about clapping. All right, you do that. You think about it and then you clap your hands. However, an involuntary action will be what then?
Blinking.
Hmm?
Blinking.
Blinking. Yeah, actually, that could be involuntary too. Especially like when it is you come into contact with like bright light or something hot, or when dust enters your eye, right? Those would be involuntary. And also when it is you pull your hand away from a hot object. Yeah, all of those would be involuntary actions. You don't think before you do it. All right, it happens first, and then you are made aware of the action as it's taken place. All right, so yes. And your involuntary actions happen so quickly because it serves to protect you from something. All right, so this is how those are the type of reflex actions that we have, and this is in essence how it happens. All right, so first you start off at your receptor cell. So again, you have to have your cells to receive the particular action, okay, to receive the particular stimulus. Once your receptor cells receive this information, it is passed along your sensory neurons. So basically, it is passed along one of these. All right, your sensory neuron would look something like this. So that you see the dendrites here, they will actually be located at this by this junction here, so that from the receptor now it relays this information directly to your sensory neuron. So the impulse continues, electrical impulse here, electrical impulse continues to pass along in one direction. At the end of the sensory neuron now, when it reaches your relay neuron, which would be found, like for example, in your spinal cord, it passes it on, and it's just like a race. So you know how in a relay race, you would have, like let's just say for example, four of you running a relay. The first person who's doing the first leg of the race would run and pass the baton on to the second person, then the third, then the fourth, and final, he would finish it off. That is exactly what is going on here. So all of the information is being relayed now to your relay neuron, which will pass it one to the other. You have different relay neurons, just as how you have different sensory neurons. Different relay neurons pass it on one to the other until now, like from your spinal cord, until it will send the information right through your motor neuron, right? So just as the name suggests, motor means something to do with movement. So hence the reason your motor neurons are what would be responsible for making your effectors work or move a particular way. So according to the reaction that is relayed from the relay neuron, after it gets the information from your sensory neuron, it will say, okay, such and such is the case, well then we need to pull away the hand. So it interprets the information, then right away gives orders to your motor neuron to tell your effector now what to do. So your effector cells would like for example be your muscle cells, for example. So your motor neuron will tell your effectors, hey, contract and pull away. And all of that happens in a split second. So when it is you blink or when it is you pull your hand away from a hot pot, all of this is happening in less than a nanosecond for you to pull away your hand. All right. And this is exactly what happens in a reflex act. Okay, and what happened is that even though the information is passed on, like to your spinal cord, is relayed there, the information goes to your brain, but it would kind of go to your brain a little bit after. So what happens is that in the case of you touching a hot pot, your, how you call it, your spinal cord would just issue the command to your effectors to get you to pull away, right? And once that happens, well, you would pull away. So the reason why it would happen like that, and the reason why your spinal cord will be responsible for carrying out that type of action, is just so that you could have that action occurring quickly. All right. Once and then after, now it'll go to your brain, and your brain will still be made aware, and then you'll that's how after that action takes place, now you would still be wondering, like, or you might think about what to do next. So it's not just you pull away. After, your thought process kicks in and it's like, okay, I need to put my hand in some cold water, I need to go and ice it, I need to do something. That is, all of that is your brain working. If the information didn't reach your brain, then you would have just stopped at pulling away your hand and you wouldn't do anything. All right. But the whole idea of these reflex actions, these involuntary reflex action, is to protect you from the immediate danger. Okay. Do you all understand how it works in a reflex act? Did I lose anybody, or is it making sense so far? Okay, wonderful. Remember, feel free to interrupt me anytime, right? So again, remember, like, the names of these things too will help you all in understanding their role and function. So, like, for example, always remember, think receptors as receive, think sensory as sense. So it's processing, okay? It's sensing the information that is received. Relay neuron, just like a race, you are passing on the information in order to get a particular effect. So you have to receive first, you sense, then you relay this information, and then you act. When you act now is where you'll get your motor neuron and your effector. Your motor neuron telling your effectors what to do. All right, and always remember that for us, with our central and peripheral nervous system, messages that are embodied in the electrical impulses only pass in one direction. Hence the reason the arrows show that direction. Okay? All right, so this is everything that I just explained. And this is the picture that shows you what it is happens when you touch the hot plate, right? So first of all, you touch the hot surface, so you get your pain receptors, okay? Your pain receptors are activated, and then this information, this extreme heat that is potentially damaging, travels all the way along. So from your receptor, travels all the way along your sensory neurons. So all of this is neurons after neurons. The information is passing through. So follow with me. It continues. It continues. All right. We're still on the sensory neurons. Goes along. When it reaches now your spinal nerves, that is where the point at which it will then pass the information on to your relay neuron, which would be found in your spinal cord area. All right, because you want a swift reaction right away to protect you from that danger. So your spinal cord is the one that will issue the command. So you send for the information to your relay neuron in your spinal cord. Then it continues this, when it perceives the information, it processes it, then it sends it to the motor neuron. It sends out a response then to your motor neuron, which will, so that your motor neuron will know how to act and what to tell your effectors to do. So then this message of this set of instructions now passes along your motor neuron until it goes to your effectors, which would be your muscles in this case. So it will make the muscle contract, pulling away your hand from the hot plate or hot pot or hot oil or whatever it might be. All right, so this is in essence how it works. So a diagram like this, you all should be able to label as well. And you should be able to explain using a diagram like this how a reflex arc works. All right, even this one as well that we just did, this diagram tends to come as well. Okay, both of them. So you all need to know. And like I said, they typically stick close with the diagrams that they give you all. So you know it's normally not too different. But even if it's a little bit different, these steps will always remain the same. So once you'll understand it, you should be able to apply it in any other diagram, basically. Okay. Okay, so this is what we spoke of as well. If you are asked about what comprises a reflex arc, it's always comprised of sensory, relay, and motor neurons. All right, so well, of course, you have your receptor cells as well, but the main components of the reflex arc would be your sensory neuron, relay, and motor neurons. All right, and these are the definitions for involuntary versus voluntary actions, which we just spoke about, and you all correctly identified them. So excellent work. Okay, so let's continue. Right, so remember earlier I was telling you all about the different types of neurons that we're going to encounter. Well, sensory, relay, motor. Right, so the sensory neuron looks something like this. So these here are called your, what is this part on top here called? You all remember? Let me see who remember. This little tree branch on top.
This the dendrite.
Excellent. It's called the dendrite. And what is this part here called?
The axon.
Excellent. And what is this called?
The receptance.
The axon terminals?
Okay.
Or the nerve end?
That's what it's called.
Yeah, so at the end here, because remember this is all parts of the same neuron, right? So at the end here, it's the end, basically. So that's why it will be called the nerve end or the axon terminal, because it is found at the end of the axon. You understand?
Yes, miss.
Okay.
Ages we are just pulling my brain to remember it.
Oh, excellent. Well, very good. And I see Dimitri identified it as well, so excellent work, Dimitri. All right. What now here we see in cell bodies, right? Yeah, she unmute she mic and thing this time, and also that she wouldn't type slow. Very good. What does this cell body create? This cell body that is found here, what will it form? What does it produce then? Excellent, myelin. And what is the purpose of myelin? Excellent, insulation. So it's insulation for the wire. All right, excellent. Insulator for the electrical signals. Very good. All right, and what else does it do? Besides insulation, what else does it allow for? Excellent. Yes, the fast movement or the fast transmission or the fast passing of impulses. Very good, both of you, Dimitri and Desha. Very good. All right, so it not only provides insulation, but it allows for the electrical impulses to move quickly along. Excellent. All right, so this is how a sensory neuron looks. This is how a relay neuron looks. Notice the amount of dendrites all over because it is relaying the information. And this is how a motor neuron looks. So in essence, from the relay neuron, you see at the ends here, it would be connected to the dendrites of the motor neuron here, so that the information from the sensory neuron, when it reaches the nerve endings here, or the axon terminals right here, the information then jumps or is transmitted to the relay neuron through these, okay, through these dendrites, passes along the cell body, which will then be connected to your motor neurons through via the dendrites, and then the information continues to be passed along this cell body of the motor neuron. When it comes to the end, then the information goes along to your effectors, which will initiate an instant response. All right, and this is how it happens, and this is how it looks. So they basically look more or less the same. All right, you have your dendrites, which will receive the information from another neuron, and it continues to pass them along. So this is how the cellular wires of your body looks and operates. All right, it's very interesting, and the interesting thing is that you don't have a buffer. Your body comes with this. Imagine all of this develops in you, right? Imagine all of this develops as you are developing in the womb. You have all of these or you have all of these neurons, all of these electrical impulses being passed along. All of this is involved, all of this is in you, right? So it's really, really interesting to see how it is the human body works, and how it connects and transmits messages from one place to the other. If it is you were to rely on humans to do something like that, well, I mean, there's always problems somehow, but not within your body. Yes, it is awesome. And imagine you have all this electricity passing through you and you don't get shocked, right? Yeah, and you don't even realize that it's, when it is you touch something hot or something way too cold or something sharp, you instantly recognize it. There is no buffer, no, wait while the message is loading. It have nothing like that. Your body is really interesting. Really, really. I know, right? I don't understand how people could not love science either. It's so mind blowing. And it's like the more you know, the more you want to know. And it just makes you so much more aware of how amazing your body is. I mean, it has so many gray areas, yes, but it's nice when you could be able to understand how you operate on a daily basis. It's beautiful, beautiful. Okay, so now that we, come through the reflex arc and we spoke about the structures of neurons and all of that, we need to talk about something very, very important now. We're going to talk about something called synapses. So, first of all, let me just explain something before we get back to that, right? You see the end here of the sensory neuron, where the nerve end is here, and then you see where the top of the relay neuron will be. Right. Now, what happens is that these ends are not directly connected, in the sense that they are not fitly joined together in connection to allow for the electrical signals to pass through. So what happens is that you have a little space where one nerve ends and where the other one begins. Just a little teeny tiny space, nothing too much, but it is extremely important. All right, that little teeny tiny space that you see is what you call a synapse. All right, now the space itself is called a synaptic cleft, but everything, be it where you have one nerve ending and the other nerve beginning, and where you have the little space between the two, that whole thing is called the synapse. But the space itself, if you are referring to that alone, it is called a synaptic cleft. All right, so okay, so let me get to the diagram so you all can visually see. Right. So this is where you have the ending of one neuron. So this is the axon of a sensory neuron, for example, and this is where you get to the nerve ending. And here now is the dendrite of another neuron. Okay, the cell body, well, the dendrite of the relay neuron. Okay. Now look at how here you are seeing there has a narrow gap. So it's not that the end of one sensory neuron is directly attached to the beginning of the other nerve. It's not like that. All right? There is a space. Okay? Um, why do y'all think this is? Before we get into how messages are now transmitted from one to the other, why y'all think that the sensory neuron just, or the end, the axon terminal and the dendrite couldn't just be, attached together? Why y'all think it have to have a space for? What's the purpose of that space?
The chemical, something like that. I'm not sure how to.
Right, so you going into the whole process of how it happens, but I want to know, why is it that you have that gap? Yes, Desha, you are on the right track. Electrical overload. So what happens is that that is your body's own way. In that design, it's like kind of controlling the amount of the intense, how intense or how much electricity passes from one neuron to the other. So it's like you don't need the whole surge. You might just need some of it. So hence the reason you can't have it touching, all right? Because you could, suffer an overload, yes. So you need to have the gap, and that is why our bodies are designed that way. All right, and then now, so excellent. Just as how Emily was talking about the chemicals, this is where now we get to how the messages are actually transmitted from one neuron to the other. And it's not electrically, it's chemically. All right, so stick with me for a little bit. All right, so we have this narrow gap here. One neuron ends, the next one begins. When it is, the electric impulse reaches the end of one axon terminal, or just reaches the end, the nerve end, what happens is that it triggers these tiny little vesicles to move to the end of the cell membrane. Now, these little vesicles contain chemicals which are called neurotransmitters. It is called neurotransmitter because it transfers, it transmits the message from one neuron to the other. So it's neurotransmitter, all right? So it's a transmitter of information from one neuron to the other. And it is a chemical. So these are little chemical substances that are found within little tiny vesicles in the axon terminal of one neuron, right? Or the end of one neuron. So when the impulse reaches the end now, this automatically triggers these vesicles to move to the end here of this membrane. And as you could see, you're seeing where the vesicles kind of open a little bit, and you're seeing these little tiny dots where the neurotransmitter is released. So when it is now, these tiny vesicles reach the end here, they actually create like a charge, which opens an ionic gateway. So it creates like an ionic charge, right? Just like a positive charge. And a gateway is open so that the neurotransmitters that are contained in the vesicles could now diffuse just across. So it releases them. All right. Everybody with me so far? Y'all good so far? All right, we continuing. All right, so stick with me. So we have here now these neurotransmitters being released from the end now of one neuron. Okay. Now, what happens when physical energy to chemical energy? It's not that the energy is converted. What happens is that when the electricity when electricity reaches the end here, it kind of grounds it off so that it doesn't go forward. And in that sense now, what happens is that these chemicals are automatically produced in the end of the axon. So what happens is that it senses when the electricity reaches that point, and then now these vesicles move in order to release the neurotransmitters. All right, but these neurotransmitters now, the chemical composition of them is like the way in which the chemicals are composed or are made, it um, it will relay now the same exact message that would have been transmitted via the electricity. All right, because you have different neurons to relay different sensations, to relay different messages, and your neurotransmitters will contain the same information that would have been embodied in the electricity. But you see, by the time the electricity reaches the end, now it sort of grounds off and it's not allowed to pass through. All right, so when it reaches this area, the area of the end, it will prompt now your vesicles to move forward to just release now the chemicals, and the chemicals contain the same amount of information as relayed in the electricity. All right, yeah, understand? Okay, wonderful. Now now you will notice that okay, there's a gap here. So how come is it now that the vesicles, you might probably be wondering, how come these little neurotransmitters don't just disperse and go all over? What happens is that in order to ensure that these vesicles are transmitted in one direction and it goes where it's supposed to go, is that on the receiving dendrite, right, on the receiving cell body, they have certain receptor shapes. All right, and what happened is that these neurotransmitters have a specific shape to bind onto the receptors of this dendrite. So it could only fit there, and these receptors are only located on one side, so it's not just located all over. It is only located on one side so that they could go. And you might probably be wondering about, well, if they have little loafers now, because, what happens is that not all of the neurotransmitters are needed. So what happens is that once the signal is passed, once enough of the neurotransmitters have bounded to the receptors on the dendrite of this neuron, the excess now will be recalled and will re-enter into the vesicles to be reused for another time. All right. So, and in essence, when it is your neurotransmitters, when these chemicals bind now to the receptor cells of the dendrite, it charges it up, and then eventually it would create enough charge to send forth a huge impulse along that other neuron, and hence the same message is passed around. So electricity here is grounded off, but these chemical transmitters will initiate another jolt, then, for lack of another terminology, another jolt of electricity, which contains the same message, right? And it will travel along along the axon of the other neuron until again it reaches the end, and you will have this whole process occurring once more. All right. Before I ask you all again, if you understand, if you have any difficulties, I have a video of this to show. It's a very short video, so let's just take a quick look at it.
A chemical synapse is a special junction between two neurons that allows them to communicate without being physically connected. A synapse has several structures. The presynaptic neuron ends in a small bulb called the presynaptic terminal. The postsynaptic terminal membrane is directly adjacent, separated by a small space called the synaptic cleft. An action potential causes voltage-gated calcium ion channels to open in the presynaptic terminal. The influx of calcium ions prompts synaptic vesicles to release neurotransmitters via exocytosis. This neuron is releasing acetylcholine. The neurotransmitter quickly diffuses across the synaptic cleft. Two acetylcholine molecules bind with one ligand-gated sodium channel at the postsynaptic membrane, opening the channel. When enough sodium ion channels open, the postsynaptic cell depolarizes and the action potential continues along the neuron.
Right, so that is just in short how it occurs. So you would have heard the term action potential. The action potential is just basically the impulse. So don't let that term get you confused. And when they speak about the depolarization, they just refer to how the impulse is generated again in order to be transmitted along the axon of the next neuron. All right. How are you all with this? Do you all understand how synapse, how messages are relayed across synapse?
Yeah, miss.
Okay, wonderful. Is there anybody who has any questions so far? Oh, it's all good. I know it would take a little bit, getting used to as well. And I have the past paper questions for you all to practice as well, so that you all could take your time, review the lecture, review the PowerPoints, and you all could attempt the questions. And there's a question on this as well, so you all will be able to see it. Okay, so wonderful. We'll continue. If any questions pop up along the line, feel free to ask. Okay. All right, so all of this I explained just now, right, with how the neurotransmitters work to translate, to transmit the message, and the fact that the binders, the receptors from the other dendrite as well, they are located on one side, and the neurotransmitters are located on one side. So the impulses can only go across from the side that it is located on. So then the messages can be relayed only in one direction. Okay. All right. So this brings us to the end of that part. Okay. That is one that is the central nervous system, peripheral nervous system. We spoke about the reflex arc. We spoke about neurons, the structure of neurons, how they are designed in order to transmit electrical impulses from one neuron to another. We have come to the end of that part. All right. Y'all okay? How are your brains looking? It's your brain cells being fried, or you're okay so far? The next thing that we have to go on to is talking about the eye and talking about how it is oh gosh, Iron's head melted. Oh gosh. Don't worry, you can tough it out, you can tough it out. But Cheyenne, you're good otherwise though. You understand, you're on the same, we're on the same page? Oh wonderful. So it's just that your brain cells had to regenerate right now. No problem. Right, so we finished with that part. So one major part is down. We have the next major part to talk about now, which is the eye and the structure of the eye. Now, of course, anytime it comes to any form of anatomy, it's always tedious, because you had to learn to draw, you had to learn to label, you had to learn to relate structure to function. So it's all just, it could be a lot, it could become overwhelming, but with any revision, whether you're doing it in bio, physics, chemistry, whatever, just take it in parts, right? Try not to think about the overall workload, but take it in just bits and pieces, and then eventually you'll complete the whole thing. All right, take it topic by topic, chapter by chapter, even subtopic by subtopic on the particular topic. All right, whichever one works for you. Okay. we spoke about receptors. We know that in your skin you have receptors, and that's how you are able to sense touch and temperature and pain and all of that. So when somebody pinch you, you could go ow, right? So because you have receptors in your skin, right? But you see, not only that, your receptors can also be part of a sense organ, right? Your eye, for example, is an example of such a sense organ. Now, the type of receptors that you will have inside your eye, right, which specifically is inside your retina, you have your cone and rod cells. Those are called photoreceptors. Anybody know why they're called photoreceptors?
It says when the light goes through the retina, it just make a picture.
No, but just the receptors and so why it says they are called photoreceptors? Like, what's the purpose for the name?
When I don't know when.
Break it apart. We have photo and we have receptors. Yes, because they receive, well, they perceive light. Yeah, they receive light, right? Photo meaning light, yes. They receive light. So receptor meaning receive and photo referring to light. So hence the reason those type of receptors are called light receptors, right? So very good. Okay, and Emily, your explanation will come in just now when we're talking about how you are actually able to see something. Okay, so you're not off, you're just ahead. Right, so I was that okay, so your eye is part of the sense organs, right? You have other sense organs, so you have your ears, and you would realize that if your hearing is off, your balance will be off. Okay, you have nose, which is responsible for your sense of smell, your tongue, which is responsible for your tasting, your sense of taste, and it also is sensitive to temperature. Hence the reason you could you just react the way you just react when you eat some hot food or you drink something real hot, right? You react accordingly, right? And you make that funny kind of mouth gesture. And your skin, as I just said, is sensitive to touch, temperature, and pain. All right, hence the reason you are able to perceive all of this because of the receptors in your skin as well. So all of those are sense organs, but we spoke about the skin already, so we're gonna talk about the eye, right? For GCE, you don't need to know about your ears, really, and you don't need to know about your nose, all right? For CXC, that doesn't really come much, but it doesn't hurt to know, but it really doesn't come. All right. So no need to worry there. Focus on the skin and focus on your eye. Okay, so the human eye. Whenever it is you go to a doctor's office, you typically see posters with, you know, different anatomies. So you would see, for example, the skeletal system, and you'll see the eye, which would look something like this. Right? So this is in essence how your eye is made up. Okay. Now, part of your eye, this one part here that we talking about, called the conjunctiva, which is a thin transparent layer which covers your eye all here. All right. That, if it is you were to touch your eyeball now, that is what you would be touching, and the part that burns is, you know, it reacting to either the germs or the alcohol from your hand sanitizer before you touch your eye, which you shouldn't touch your eye now, right? Because of COVID and all of that. Okay? So your conjunctiva is that thin transparent membrane which covers the front of your eye. It is a protective layer. So it protects everything that lays behind it. Think of it as the transparent skin of your eye, right? Just as how this brown skin protects everything else that is inside your body, your conjunctiva would, you know, protect everything behind it. All right, it has to be kept moist, hence the reason your eyes don't feel well when it is dry. So the so the fluid now that is made in your tear glands is spread throughout your that layer, that conjunctiva, which will keep it moist, and it contains lysozyme, which will kill off any bacteria that tries to enter into your eye. So when dust or anything that shouldn't enter your eye wants to try to enter, your eye will start to burn. And when it burns now, it will cause you to tear up, which will help to flush out whatever pathogen is trying to enter into your system, right? So it's all protection as well. And any other bacteria which enters the eye on a daily basis, even those that may not burn, the lysozyme would kill off that bacteria, all right, hence protecting your insides. Because if anything is allowed to get through, well, then it will corrupt your entire vision. It could even reach as far as your brain, all right? So hence the reason you need that protection, and it could become quite vulnerable. All right, so this is where your conjunctiva is, as previously stated. All right. Okay, another part of the eye now, you also will have your iris here. Okay, so we're going to look at how it is your iris functions in order for you to see, and how the iris works together with your lens in order to direct light. So this here is your lens. In front here, you would have your pupil, which we know, and many times when it is you go to the doctor for a checkup, they take a bright light and they flash it in your eyes because they want to see how your pupils react to light, how it's contracting, how it's relaxing, and all of that. All right, to make sure that things are working normal in that department. Your cornea is this outer layer here. All right, and we spoke about the conjunctiva. Your sclera is this part of the eye here. It's a ruggedy kind of part which lies in the socket where your eye is resting in your bone. That is the part that is closely connected with it. All right. Then here you would have your vitreous body. So the vitreous body, vitreous is a Latin word that means glass. So it's kind of glassy, but it's filled with liquid actually, which it covers this entire space from behind your lens here all the way to the back of the eye. All right. You would also have muscles on either side, which would be responsible for, your eye being able to move left and right and so forth. Here you have your choroid, here's your retina. Your macula is this entire area, which includes your retina and this little pit here called your fovea. All right, so we're going to learn about what these are responsible for as well. And right here you have your optic nerve, which leads directly to your brain. So you need that optic nerve so that your brain now could process the images that you would be able to see. All right, so let's continue. All right, so your retina, where we just saw, it is located at the back of the eye, as we just see here, right? This is located at the back of the eye, where your retina is. All right, it is located at the back of the eye. When light falls on receptor cells in the retina, an electrical impulse will be sent along the optic nerve to your brain. So once light falls, typically here where you see this little pit, you have a whole lot of your photoreceptor cells, your cones and your rods are located in here. So when light is focused on your retina, an impulse is sent along your optic nerve to your brain so that it can sort out the image that is being seen. All right. Now, what happens is that your receptor cells can be sensitive to light of colors, and it can also, you have some of them that are not sensitive to that light. So some of these cells, some of these receptor cells, like for example, your cone cells, they will be able to process light. So which is why you could see blue, you could see green, orange, an amalgam of colors because of your cone cells. And your rod cells are responsible for you being able to see at night. And they don't respond to color, so you'll typically see it in black and white, right? So you wouldn't see it in the vivid color that you would normally see in daylight, okay? Right, now the fovea, which is the little pit that I showed you just now, this little pit here found in the retina. Your fovea, it contains, you know, a lot of cells, a lot of receptor cells that are tightly packed together, all right? They are closely packed together so that when light is focused there, you'll be able to see a clear image, all right? Now, apart from your fovea, you also have what is called a blind spot, where the optic nerve, that is that area where the optic nerve leaves the retina. It is called a blind spot. And if light falls there, you won't be able to see anything. No impulses will be sent to the brain. The only way you can have impulses sent to the brain is if light falls on the fovea in the retina, okay? And what happened is that because remember you have a whole lot of light entering into your eye at once, so in order to prevent now, you know, you just having a whole light chaos inside there, you need to have a choroid, all right, which is what we see here. This, you notice that it's directly behind the retina, right, or the macula, that whole area here, the choroid. It is actually a black layer. So what that will do now is that it will absorb the excess light after it has been passed through the retina. So you will have, you know, the light that is responsible for creating the image now that you are seeing, but you'll have excess light that might be scattered in there. So you need the choroid now, which is that black layer that will absorb any excess light in order to prevent you from having or from suffering from any kind of light chaos inside, all right? But not only is it responsible for actually absorbing the rest of the light, it is also responsible for nourishing the eye, okay? So it contains rich blood vessels, which will give the eye the nourishment that it needs, all right? You all okay so far?
Yes, miss.
Wonderful. Right. Now, with respect to your cones and your rod cells, these are, you know, the types of photoreceptors that you have. You have 3 different types of cones, which can be sensitive to red, green, and blue light. And then from there now, it will mix these in order to get you the colors that you need to see. Your rods, however, can only see in dim light, but it will process information in black and white, and you will not get that color vision that you would get with your cone cells. So that's why in the nighttime, you won't see color as easily. Only the more light that enters your eye is the more you will be able to see color. All right, but other than that, you won't be able to see color so readily. All right. Right, so what happens is that when it is, you look directly into an object, your cones are what we need in order to produce a sharp image and in color as well, and not black and white TV now. Right? And your rods are found further out into the retina, so hence they are less tightly packed together because they are further, and they will show a less detailed image. So because your cones are more tightly packed together and they are more upfront, you can get a sharper image produced as compared to the image produced from your rods. Okay, so let's just look at what the cones and the rod receptors look like. So yes, they look like aliens, all right? These look like little creatures, all right, with 3 legs. But you could see the similarity between this and a neuron, right? Now these are receptors, okay? So when it receives the light, okay, it is passed along the body of the cones and the rods. And look here, you see a synaptic cleft. and then you will see the axon terminals of the other or the dendrites of the other neuron. So it goes and it continues to pass this light information along until it reaches the brain. All right, so that's the reason you'll be able to identify a receptor cell because they typically have that similar structure. All right, so even for your rods, they would in the light now, when it reaches the end here, it goes through until it reaches the other receptor, and then it continues to be passed on, and then your brain now will process this image that is being seen. Okay, and speaking about the external view of the eye is what we have here. This part here, as I just explained, is your conjunctiva. This part here, the colored part, is called your iris, and then in the middle here is where you have your pupil. All right, and your tear duct is here. So your tear duct is what is responsible for creating that liquid, that moist layer that is found on the conjunctiva in order for your eye to remain moist. And your pupil is what is responsible for, it can either get smaller to allow less light to enter, or it can get bigger in order to allow more light to enter. All right, and we're going to talk about how what muscles are involved in pupillary responses. So when it is the doctor flash the bright light in your eye, why it is your pupil will get smaller, or why it will get bigger in dimmer light. Okay. A hole in your eyelid? Which part? Oh boy, yeah, I'm feeling my eyelid now. No, a hole. Which part? Describe what you're talking about. You mean like where the tear duct is? Like on this corner? The top, where? Over the tear duct. No, I don't know if I have that. Okay, I don't know, I lost. Seriously, Emily, you have that too? I have to see what it is all they're talking about. Oh,
It's like on your
it's what?
near the tear duct, on like the bottom part, like of where you line your eyes, like if you're lining your eyeliner, like right there have a little hole, like a little one.
Oh, okay. Well, you gotta show me that one next I stay earlier. I don't think I have that. I'll have to go and check, but I don't think I have that either. I don't know. But
Isn't it everybody have one?
no, I had to see mine. I didn't see one in my eye. But I mean, well, I mean, it could possibly be related to your tear duct. So it could be, another entry, another opening for your tears as well. But no, well, I have to really see what it is all you're talking about, right? Before I could say what. But typically your tear duct is in here, this area, right in here, right? I'll watch how I want to go and look in people line out to see what it is all you're talking about. So I will let y'all know. Oh god, I'll go out somewhere and be like, hey, show me your eye, let me see. Oh gosh. So I will see what it is you're talking about, and I'll let y'all know if there's anything, right?
Yes, we'll take a picture of our eye and we'll highlight it and show you.
No problem, once I could clearly see it. All right. So yeah, this is the external part of your eye, and what it entails. Now, everything from your eyebrow to your eyelashes, they all help in protecting your eye in some way. So, your eyelashes and so forth would, help to protect your eye from dust, and even the lysozyme that would be found in the in your tears, produced by the tear duct, that would protect the conjunctiva, anything from entering directly into your eye. And then your brow could prevent sweat from leaking down into your eye, because remember, your sweat also contains like salts and so forth, so that um if that enters into your eye, it'll burn as well. All right. And just anything in general. So that is why your eye is protected. Now, of course, it's not protected against if somebody take a knife and poke your eye, right? That's different, but just general protection. Okay, general protection. This is the outside, and this is the inside. So this is the diagram that you all mainly need to be familiar with. In your exam, the diagram of your eye would typically look like this, right? So this is what you all need to know. The muscles attaching the the muscles attaching your eye to your skull, they are what is responsible for your eye moving up, down, left, and right. Okay, this here is your conjunctiva, this layer on the outside. All right, this is the cornea, the hardest part of your eye. Your iris is here, which is the colored part that we just saw. The pupil is in the middle. This is the lens, which is responsible for focusing and directing light to the retina, right? The aqueous humor with salt to nourish your lens is around this area as well. It's produced by the tear glands. All right. You have ciliary muscles, which would be responsible for contracting and relaxing to either make your pupil get wider, or also, sorry, not the pupils, your lens. The ciliary muscles would contract or relax in order to make your lens larger or smaller, or fatter out enough, in order to, focus light accordingly. All right. So we'll delve into that a little bit later. All right, suspensory ligaments responsible for holding the lens in place. All right, well, this is your vitreous humor, right, which I explained just now. It comes from the word glass, that means glass, vitreo. Here's your blind spot. If light falls here, you will not get any electrical impulses being sent to the brain, so therefore you won't see anything if light falls on your blind spot. All right, here's where your optic nerve is. Your fovea is this little pit here that is found in the retina. So light has to reach this area, because here's where you'd have your cones and your rods that are tightly packed together. So once light reaches here, your lenses are responsible for bending the light to reach here. All right, so that you'll be able to see. And this is your retina as well. And look, the black layer is called your choroid, that is responsible for absorbing any excess light, so that you wouldn't have fireworks of light on the inside of your eye. And finally, you have your sclera, which is where the outside of the eye, where it rests in the orbit, which is that socket inside your skull. All right. So if it is yours, so like in movies, I don't know if you all would have probably seen that in her movie or somewhere, but you would see like a whole eyeball after it's probably pulled out or whatever. You would see it's kind of rough on the outside, where you have your little arteries and so forth. That whole outer layer there is what is called your sclera, which is what would rest in the socket of your which will be resting on your eye socket. Sorry. But yeah, that is in essence what the sclera is. At least you have the vivid image, right? Okay, so you all need to know this. Learn, CSEC students learn to draw it, learn to label it, GCE students mainly. make sure that you all are able to also state what the function of each part of the eye is and how it all comes together to help you to see. Okay. All right. So we're going good so far. Let's talk a little bit now about the iris. All right, which, let me just go back to this picture so you would see it again. The iris is this colored part right here. So this is what we're talking about, okay? This part here. Right, so that is the colored part of the eye as we just spoke about. It contains pigments which would absorb light as well in addition to the pupil, and it stops it from getting through to the retina. All right, so it acts as a light filter as well. All right, so your pupil now most of the light will go through your pupil, and the size of your pupil now will determine just how much light is allowed to enter to reach to the retina. All right, so the wider your pupil is, the more light will enter, and the smaller your pupil is, the less light will enter. Okay. Now, typically, when it is you're looking at stronger lights or brighter lights, your iris closes in, which will help to make the pupil smaller to prevent too much light from getting in. Because if it is you have too much light entering into your eyes, it will damage your retina. And this is also why you need a choroid, which is that black layer behind your retina, to absorb any excess light that would have entered. So in order to control now the amount of light that enters in, your pupil and your iris muscles need to work together to either make the pupil larger or smaller. So this is where we come to the two muscles that are responsible for this. All right, so you have circular muscles. So as the term suggests, they lie in circles. They are circular muscles, so they lie in circles. All right, they lie in circles around the pupil. So because they lie around the pupil, think of it as forming like a barrier. So when it is they constrict now, they send in the pupil, they make it smaller. All right, I just saying it so that you all can get the visual in your head, right? And then now, apart from your circular muscles, you have radial muscles. You'll remember in maths when it is you have to find the diameter and the radius. You'll remember the radius, right? The radius is what? The diameter is what and the radius is what? You math people. Let me hear you. What is the diameter and what is the radius? Who remembers? Going once.
Miss, what you asking?
What is the diameter and what is the radius? You'll remember when you had to find diameter and radius of a circle in maths? Right, so the distance from one end of the circle to the other, so the whole thing, right? And the diameter is radius by 2. Very good. Right, so seeing that how the radius is half of the diameter, your radial muscles are like that. So let me get to the diagram so y'all could see it. Right, so look here, the first diagram of the eye, this is where your circular muscles are. It lies on the outside of the pupil. But your radial muscles, see that is only a part, so it is connected from one end of the iris to an end of the pupil. So hence the reason it is called radius, because it's half. But this one is called the circular because it is it goes around the pupil. All right. When it is you are faced with bright light, as in when the doctor examining, giving you an eye exam, or even when you go to an optometrist and they're giving you an eye exam, they will flash bright light in your eyes. What is happening at that point in time is that your circular muscles here will contract. So when it is they contract, they send in the pupil or they make it smaller to allow less light to enter in, all right, because the light is bright. When the light is dim now, your radial muscles, which is this right here, all right, that spans from one end of the iris to one end of the pupil, When that contracts, that will only contract in dim light, all right? So when it contracts, it pulls the pupil outwards, making it larger in order to allow for more light to enter into your pupil. All right, so and that is how, because remember, if it is you have less light now, you want to be able to see. So that's the reason your pupils now will dilate or get larger, so that as much light as possible could enter in to give you a good enough view, a more proper view. All right, but in bright light, you cannot have so much light entering into your eye. So hence the reason now your pupils need to be made smaller. Do you all understand? Do you all understand the terminology? Is it easy to remember the circular and the radial muscles and how they contract and relax? Wonderful.
Yes, miss.
Wonderful. So we're going good, or they're going good, man? Okay, so now that we've spoken about that, we have to get to now the focusing of light in itself. All right, so a clear image has to be focused on the retina in order for the brain to see that clear image. All right, whatever image it is you're looking at, remember, in order for you to see anything, it means that light has to fall on the object and then it is bounced off that surface and enters into your eyes. You all did that already in physics, reflection and refraction and those things. Well, those of you who do in physics, that is. Well, at least you should have done it, or you would have to do it. So, you know, you'd be able to relate it from that perspective, right? So when light falls off an object, it will bounce off and it will enter into your eye, and that is how you would be able to see it, right? So what happened is that just as how you all would have learned, right, even from doing integrated science, that different objects, depending on how they are made, would allow different light intensities to pass through. So if the object is clear or transparent, all the light will pass through. If the object is opaque, it will, you know, just allow some light to pass through. And if it's just a solid object and it's, you know, it wouldn't allow light to pass through it, right? But light will bounce off of it. So with respect to your eyes now, the humors on the inside of your eye, right, notice that it is colorless, all right, which, let me just go back to the diagram so y'all could see, right? So this aqueous humor, all right, it is clear, so hence the reason, and everything else is clear. Your conjunctiva, everything else is clear, so it has nothing that is hindering the entrance of light through your eyes. All right, now what happened is that the light doesn't just enter all how into your light, and the light doesn't just enter all how into your eyes, right? Your cornea is one such part that is responsible for the bending of light rays, and your lens also makes fine adjustments to help the light focus onto your retina, where your cone and your rod cells would be, so that you would be able to see the image, right? Now, interestingly enough, when it is you'll actually see an image the first time, before your brain processes it, it is actually upside down, right? That would be the experiment. That's shown in the experiment with the pinhole camera. When you see the light image, initially it is upside down, but then your brain processes it and turns the image right side up, so you are actually able to see the image as it actually is. All right, so it's not that you're walking and you're seeing everybody upside down, you see a dog running on the street upside down or nothing like that. You're seeing everything as is. And the reason why it would be upside down is because of the effects that a convex lens has on the light rays, in the way in which the light rays would be bent, and we have that convex lens. So then your brain now needs to fix this image. So according to the image that is shown here, it will send that electronic impulse to your brain, which will interpret the information that it receives and will flip the image. And imagine your brain functioning and doing this so fast and so effortlessly, you don't even feel the image being flipped. It's not like if you just see upside down first and then it changed to being right side up. That doesn't happen at all, right? You just see perfectly. So look at how fast now your brain processes this information. And imagine there's only one thing your brain does do, processing the information from your two eyes. Your brain had to process everything else throughout your body. Your brain had to adjust, regulate temperature. Certain parts of your brain had to be responsible for you not burning off your hand. Or if a dog biting you, you pulling away your leg, things like that. Imagine the amount of processes that your brain has to handle all at once, but yet it does this so effortlessly that you don't even realize all that is happening at one given point. So imagine you right now, for you to look at the screen, your brain flipping this image upside down for you to see, right? Everything. You walk outside for you to see everything normally, your brain flipping that image. So your brain is pretty amazing. All right. So now, seeing that how we're talking about how light rays are, focused onto the retina, you all need to understand and know how to draw this diagram and even to explain how light rays are actually, bent onto your retina and what happens when it is you are focusing on a near object versus what happens when you are focused on a distant object. Okay. All right. So normally when it is you are talking about light rays from a nearer object, all right, sorry, from a more distant object, the distant light rays are actually more parallel to one another, so they are straighter, so therefore not much adjustment has to be made. All right, so the light rays now enter straight, and then your lens now and your cornea will bend the light rays ever so slightly so that it would reach the retina and where the fovea is. And at this point here is where the image would be formed upside down. And when the image reaches here, an electrical impulse is generated along the optic nerve and goes to your brain in order for it to be interpreted. All right, and this is what happens when light rays come from a distant object. All right, just continuing along those lines. All right, so just reiterating, not all of the light rays would require the same amount of bending. You see, light rays that come from a closer object moving away from each other. That's why it feels more strenuous for you to look at a closer object as compared to you looking at a more distant object. All right, because distantly the light rays are more parallel, so they are more uniform, but closer the object is to you, the light rays are actually moving away from each other. They are divergent. All right, and hence the reason it requires a lot more effort by your cornea and your lens in order to bend this light now to focus it on the retina. Okay, so we're just gonna look at two diagrams here which would explain it. Right, so this is how it looks when it is you are focusing on a nearby object. Okay, so remember we said that the light rays are divergent. So if it weren't for your cornea and for your lens, this would have just reached out there and this would have reached out here. But because of your cornea and your lens now, it bends the light inwards and bends it to focus on your retina. Okay, so what happens is that your lens and okay, so your cornea needs to become wider. All right, your lens, sorry, needs to become wider in order to effectively bend the light ray so that it reaches on the retina itself. And this is how it looks when it is you are, or this is what happens when you are focused on a nearby object. Okay, because the light rays are divergent, they are moving away from each other. But on the other hand, look at what happens when it is you are focused on a distant object now. All right, the object is here. The light rays are more parallel to each other. It's not too much off. So not a lot of bending needs to be done. All right. So the lens now can be thinner, and all that has to be done is just a little slight bending so that the light could reach the retina. Okay, so light rays could be focused on the retina. And that's why it seems, effortless, like a little bit easier to focus on a distant object as compared to a nearby object because of how the light rays operate when you are referring to the two. You all have any questions? You all understand how focusing on a nearby and a distant object works, how the light is bent, sorry. Wonderful, wonderful. I go to say understand. Sorry. Okay, I'm glad you're understanding. And I don't know when it is I get all your homework too. But yeah, once you'll understand, that's the important thing. All right, so we actually have 2 more slides to get through, and then we'll do some recap with a few questions, and I'll just let y'all go. All right. All right. Now, in order for you to have a thicker lens or a thinner lens, you need to have some adjustments, all right? So the overall adjustment in the shape of the lens in order to focus light coming from different distances is what you call accommodation. So it's how your lens accommodates the light that it receives. Hence the reason it is called accommodation. All right, for you to get when it is you have a thicker lens, it means that you have to bend the light rays more. So hence the reason your lens need to be thicker in order for you to have that extra bending of light rays. When it is you have a thinner lens, then well, the light rays won't be bent as much. All right, so that is what happens. And what the whole process of that, the whole adjustment of the shape of this lens, whether it be thicker or thinner lens, is referred to as accommodation. Okay. Now, your lens are held in position by what we call sensory ligaments that holds the lens in position and prevents it from moving all over the place, right? It's kind of like your body's version of a glasses frame, or the frame itself would hold the lens in position so you don't have to keep holding it yourself, right? Your suspensory ligaments are responsible for holding your lens in place. And all of this is just developed in your body. Imagine that, right? Then now we found out about circular muscles and we found out about radial muscles, but now we are learning about ciliary muscles, all right? So the ciliary muscles alters the amount of tension in the suspensory ligaments, which would change the shape of the lens. All right, so you have these muscles that will either increase or decrease the tension in your suspensory ligaments, and that will change the overall shape of the lens in order to accommodate the bending of the light rays, whether it be more bending or less bending. All right, so this is how it works here. I divided it into 2. All right, the contraction, when you have your ciliary muscles contracting, your suspensory ligaments are loosened. Once your suspensory ligaments are loosened, then your lens becomes thicker. It's like it letting go to allow the lens to become larger. All right? So remember, the contraction of the ciliary muscles equals the loosening of suspensory ligaments, which means thick lens. For you to have thick lens, your suspensory ligaments had to be loose. But if it is you want to get thin lens now, what happens is that your ciliary muscles need to relax themselves. When they relax, interestingly enough, normally you would have expected it to be the opposite, right? Contract meaning tight and relax meaning loose, but it's kind of the opposite. So your ciliary muscles, when they relax, your suspensory ligaments get tighter and your lens becomes thinner. So the relaxing of the ciliary muscles tightens your suspensory ligaments, and when they are tightened, it pulls the ligaments up so that your lens could become thinner. And of course, a thick lens means that more light is able to be bent, that the light rays are able to be bent more, and the thin lens mean that the light won't be bent as much. Okay, just for you to get a visual now of that theory. Right, so this is how it looks. Okay, when your ciliary muscle relaxes, again, your sensory ligaments are pulled tight. Your sensory ligaments are here, and these are where your ciliary muscles would be found. So if you ever had to label it on a diagram, this is where it would be. When it relaxes, this lens here is pulled thinner, and what happens is that your not much bending of the light will be done. Okay, and this happens when you are focusing on what? A near or a distant object. What y'all think? For your lens to be pulled thin. A near or a distant object. Y'all hearing me? Audio is back. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I think I just saw a message saying that the internet connection was a bit unstable just now, so probably that's why. Okay, so what the first part, when the ciliary muscles relax to produce a thin lens, when do you all think that will happen? When you are focusing on a distant object or when you're focusing on a nearer object? What y'all think?
Miss, you could repeat the question, please.
Sure. When it is the lens is pulled thin, does that mean you are focusing on a distant object or a nearby object? Very good, distant object. And then the other one, when the lens is pulled, when the lens is actually thicker, what does that mean? It will mean the opposite, yeah? And of course, it is shown on the diagram as well, on the picture. So you all should have had an easy guess with the answer. Right, so distant, nearby. When your ciliary muscle contracts, the opposite happens. The suspensory ligaments are slackened to allow the lens now to become bigger, which would mean more bending of the light could actually take place. All right. So, do you all understand that? This brings us to the end of the eye and the central nervous system. Okay, Emily understands. Everybody else understand? Right, Cheyenne. Excellent. Right, so it's a lot of information to take in. So I had to divide this into two as well because I really want you all to understand and to grasp this before we do the other part of coordination, because this is in humans now. Then we have to do coordination in plants. It's not a lot, but you know, you need to understand the more complicated one first, and then you'll understand the plants one. Okay. So next time I see you, we'll be doing drugs. So we're going to learn about how drugs affect you and why it is you feel or people feel the way that they do feel when taking drugs. And we have to learn about coordination in plants. So we learned about central nervous system and all of that, but plants don't have a central nervous system. So we're going to learn about their response, all right? But before I let you go, we'll just do some quick revision, all right? And then I'll leave you for the night, all right? So hold on 1 second. Oh, I have another video to show you all as well. Let me show you all that video before we go on. Why this thing not showing? It's ready to show how the neurons communicate. That was the other video I had opened up.
Communicate with each other, relaying messages throughout your body and powering all of your thoughts and actions. Neurons talk to each other using both electrical and chemical signals. Messages start as electrical signals traveling rapidly down a neuron. These signals are called action potentials. When they reach the gap between two neurons, the messages need some help to get across. The information is transformed from an action potential into a chemical message, which crosses the gap called a synapse. The release of those chemical messengers can trigger an action potential in the neuron on the other side of the synapse, conveying the message onward. Or it can quiet the message. This happens over and over and over. And with repeated activity, the synapse gets stronger, so the next message is more likely to get through. That way, neurons learn to pass on important messages and ignore the rest. This is how our brains learn and adapt to an ever-changing world.
There you go. That will also be sent. Yeah, y'all will get the presentation and the homework and the videos, so you don't have to worry about that at all. And you'll get the recording from today's session as well. All right, so let me just get to a question for you. Okay. All right, so basically, let me ask you, all right, why is it that okay, so what are the names of the cells of the receptors that are responsible for us seeing color and for us seeing in dim light? Mm-hmm. What is responsible for that? For us seeing in color and for us seeing in dim light.
If you could repeat the question.
What is responsible for us seeing color and us seeing in dim light? What are the type of cells that are responsible for that? Right, your photoreceptor cells, and more specifically, yes, your photoreceptor cells, which are your cones, not cons, Emily. Cones and your rods. Right, so your cones allow us to see in color and the rods allow us to see in dim. What are the colors that we see? What are the three type of cone cells that we have? And what are the three colors that they allow us to see? Excellent. Red, blue, and green. Very good. Right. Now, when it is you are focused on a nearer object, tell me what happens. What happens to the eyes? What adjustments need to be made from the eyes in order for you to see a near object? Ciliary muscle contract. Ciliary muscle loosen. Continue. Right. Yeah, the ciliary muscle contracts so that the suspensory ligaments could relax to allow for the lens to get bigger. And when the lens get bigger, what happens? Yes, as Mohini said, to focus what on the retina? And what happens to the light rays? Why is it that the lens need to get bigger? Why it can't just stay the same? Remember, you're focusing on a nearby object. So what does that mean for the light now entering into your retina for you to focus on that nearby object? And why, which would account for why the lens needs to get bigger. So why? Anybody can answer. It doesn't have to be Emily or Mohini or Desha, seeing that's how they answered. Anybody could answer. Right, to direct light into the fovea. And describe to me how are the light rays entering into your eye from a nearer object? Going once, going twice. How are the light rays? Is it parallel? Is it moving away? Is it going all over the place? How is it? Is it converging? No. Parallel light rays are coming from a distant object. But when you are talking about a closer object, the light rays are divergent, meaning that they are moving away from each other. Right. So just as Mohini said, very good. So because they are diverging or moving away from each other now, your lens need to get bigger in order to bend the rays as much as possible in order for it to reach the fovea in the retina. All right. Because remember, the wider the lens is the more capable, right? Or the more able that sorry, the larger the lens means that there is an increased ability to bend the light. So you need that thicker lens in order to bend the light more. A thinner lens cannot bend the light as a thicker lens would, right? So hence the reason you see like short-sighted people or like, you know, people who have difficulty seeing, their glasses lens would be thicker, right? Just to bend the light so that they can see a much clearer image. All right, but so yeah, that is why. Do you all understand? Awesome. All right, so who could name the feature of the eye that is responsible for absorbing excess light after it reaches inside the retina? It starts with a C and it ends with a D. So it's C. Yes, very good. Choroid, very good. So that choroid is the black layer which rests right behind the retina and it allows for the absorption of light. Excellent. All right. Next question. I want y'all, it could be multiple people and one person alone doesn't have to answer. Give me the steps involved in the transmission of electrical impulses across synapses. So I want y'all to tell me how it is electrical impulses are transmitted across a synapse.
Let's repeat the question, please.
How is it that electrical impulses are transmitted across a synapse or transmitted across a synaptic cleft? Right, so it travels along the axon until it reaches which point? No, before it reached the dendrite. So it's traveling along, first of all, it has to travel from the dendrite through the cell body, through the axon, and then it will reach the axon terminals, which is the end of a neuron, right? And is when it reaches the end of the neuron is where it will encounter that synaptic cleft. So but remember, when it reaches the end, we said that the electricity is grounded off. So how is it now that the electric impulse is able to be transported from that axon terminal across the gap, across the synaptic cleft? What happens? The impulses are turned into chemical energy and are carried by vacuoles and are released by receptors who receive it on the other end. Close. Okay, so what happens is that the impulses, well, they're grounded off, but what happens is that the impulses will trigger the vesicles containing neurotransmitters to move towards the end membrane of the axon terminal. All right. When the vesicles reach that particular membrane, the end thereof, let me go back on it so that y'all could see. Right. So when the vesicles reach here now, so we're talking about the impulse, right? The impulse travels along the axon here until it reaches the axon terminal. This here is the end of the axon, right? So it's called the axon terminal. When the impulse reaches here, these vesicles are automatically triggered or activated. So they now then move towards the end of this membrane right here. When they move and they attach to the end of that membrane, they what happens is that they become charged and ionic gateways are open, which in other words is that the vesicles just open, right? So an opening is created. Once that opening is created, the neurotransmitters, which are the chemicals encased in these tiny vesicles, are then able to be released. Once they are released, they will then bind to receptor cells on the other neuron, on the dendrites of the other neuron. Okay? What happens is that these neurotransmitters have a specific shape that will bind or fit to each of the receptors on the other neuron. All right? And once that happens, now once enough has been released, then that now will then charge up this this neuron, and an electric impulse will then be generated and sent throughout, and that electric impulse will contain the same message from the previous neuron. All right, and that is how it would be transmitted across the synaptic cleft. Do you all understand, or is it still hazy? Yeah, normally Dimitri just be answering like quickly. Dimitri, where you at? You good? Wait, he gone. He disconnected, I think. Yeah, so he disconnected. Oh gosh. Hope he's okay. Something probably happened. All right, but you all understand, right? So this process, I need you all to internalize it, and I would need you all to really work on explaining it, right? I created a little document. Let me just, I'll share that with you. All of this will be emailed to you, by the way, tonight. As soon as the video finish rendering or converting, I'll send everything to you. Right. So this document I created just for neurotransmission, right? So it has where the synapse is, all right? So you can see the axon terminals right here, the synapse, the neuron of the other cell body, all right? And then the electrical signal being transported until it reaches across to the next synapse again. All right, and this is a step-by-step process. It's a little bit more in-depth as well. All right, it's a step-by-step process about how neurotransmission occurs. So hopefully it will help you to get a further insight into neurotransmission. So that will be sent to you as well. Oh, sorry, I ended the screen. Right, but yeah, that is essential. Okay, so you all need to know all of this because they like to bring these things for your exam now. Right, okay, so does anybody have any questions, comments, complaints? Anything that you would like to clarify before we go? All right. Well, you all know the drill. If it is your, like during your revision period, if there are any questions, feel free to post it in the group, email, whatever it might be, okay? I created a worksheet for y'all as well with past paper questions so that y'all could review the slides, you have your notes at your disposal, and make your best attempt to answer the questions. What it is you all don't understand, we'll go through it when next I have you, which is Sunday, the 5th of April. That's our next class, and then we'll have class the Monday again as normal. And then after next week, well, then we'll go back to our Monday classes until we've reached the end. All right, so y'all just try your best, take it easy, take time to digest the information. I won't overload your brain by starting anything else. So take your time, digest the information, and we'll hash out any misunderstandings next time I see you. All right, or you could always feel free to message me or anything. Thank you. I'll try to. And you all too, have a wonderful night. Keep safe. You'll relax yourself a bit too. And then you all can start back work again. All right. So bye, everybody. Take care. And thanks again for opting in favor of the session. Okay. It was lovely. I enjoyed it, as I always do enjoy my sessions with you all. Okay. So you all take care and continue to be safe in every way possible. All right. So bye, y'all. Until again.